Hey everyone, it's Nick here, and I've got a problem. I've got a little bit of screen haze going on here, and so I've had these screens for 4+ years now. I've just been using the same 6 screens over and over again, and I'll admit, my screen reclaiming situation is a bit less than ideal. It's a bit homemade, but I make it work. But you know me, I've been screen printing for 10+ years, and I know how to reclaim a screen. I'm very thorough when I reclaim a screen, but when it's 2 a.m. and you're reclaiming a screen, sometimes your eyes are just really tired and you don't quite get everything. Or, little things like that, just like tiny bits of ink will accumulate over time and start to mess things up. So you can see here, when I hold the screen up to the light, very bright like ceiling light, it will slightly block out the light. Not enough that, it fully blocks out the light, but just enough that I can notice it. And this manifests itself as some areas on your screen that don't fully clear out when you screen print it. And now you can see here on this screen, when I just do one pass, I can see that I have a little bit of a more solid print area here and a bit of a less solid print area over here. And that is the haze just kind of blocking out a little bit of the screen. Not enough to fully clog the screen, but just enough that it doesn't fully clear out. But it's not a humongous deal, because if I just do another pass over this image, it'll pretty much clear the screen and I'll have a solid print afterwards. And so to fix this, usually you use something called haze remover. And now when I was a student studying under Jim Jarrett, we used to use Easy Off oven cleaner as haze remover. That stuff was very caustic and it did eat the haze away, but it also ate away at the screen mesh a little bit. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't really want to deal with those fumes again, and so I never really went back to the Easy Off oven cleaner method. But when I was in grad school, my screen printing teacher Wes Bueller whispered into my ear that Franmar D Haze was the best haze remover that you could get. But back in 2020-ish times, they weren't selling it. We thought that they were discontinued forever. Maybe it was pandemic related, who knows. But at the time, we couldn't get Franmar D Haze. I never got to try it. We did try its alternative, the greener S-Green haze remover, but that wasn't quite cutting it for us over there. And now, when I went to the Blick website, I noticed that they had Franmar D Haze in stock, and so I thought I would go ahead and buy it, give it a try, and oh boy, did I give it a try, and it worked so well that I decided to stop, and I needed to make a full video review on this stuff. And they're not paying me to make this review. I bought this with my own money, and they probably don't even know who I am, but it just worked so well that I had to do a little PSA to let everybody know. So I rounded up my worst screens. As you can see, this original one that I showed earlier has got some pretty bad haze, and so this is like actual haze. It interferes with my printing. I've also got this screen that doesn't have any haze in it, but it does have a ghost image, and we're just gonna see if it can get rid of the ghost. And so you can see when I hold it up to the light, it doesn't really block the light. I can see, it becomes pretty much invisible up against the ceiling light. That's not haze, that's a ghost, and that doesn't interfere with printing. I also went through the school's shared screens, and I pulled out some of the worst offending screens. And so here I've got a screen. I think it might have a little bit of dried ink in there, some dried emulsion, and a little bit of tape residue that's not sticky anymore, but it's kind of mixed with some ink or emulsion, and it's kind of like formed a little tape mark there. I've also got this screen over here that has much fresher screen residue or tape residue on it. And so you can see here, this has got some fresh tape. If you buy cheap packing tape to mask up your screen, it'll usually leave a residue. And normal pressure washing really doesn't get rid of it. And so we'll see if the haze remover can kind of get rid of that cheap tape residue. And I've also got this screen here with some screen filler. We'll see how well it does against screen filler. If you've used it before, that stuff is some notoriously bad for being hard to reclaim. And so whenever you're working with strong chemicals and strong oxidizing agents, I always like to glove up. I already have contact dermatitis, and so I don't need any more excuses for that to flare up. And so gloves it is for me. And one thing that I didn't do that I wish I did is to wear a chemical respirator. I think some of these fumes are a little spicy, but it wasn't the worst thing I've ever experienced, and I'll talk more about it later. But if you're going to do this, might as well put on the full protective equipment. And so as per the instructions, I'm going to go ahead and spray on the dehaze onto my screen, and I'm going to kind of scrub it in. And I've got this kind of gross little scrubby sponge that we always use to reclaim our screens, and I'm just going to thoroughly make sure that I cover both sides with a lot of haze remover. And so I'm just spraying one side thoroughly, scrubbing, spraying the other side, and then scrubbing again. And then I'm not really waiting the same way that I would wait to reclaim emulsion, like a minute or so. I'm going straight for the pressure washer. I found that it works pretty fast, and so you don't really need to wait and let it kind of soak in or anything like that. And so I found that, it actually removes very easily, but as you kind of go, it kind of splashes water across the rest of the screen. And so like after I've been like spraying this for about like a minute or so, I find that it starts to get really tough to reclaim with the haze remover. I think I'm washing off the haze remover as I go with that little bit of splash off. And so you'll see me just kind of reclaim a bit, and once it gets a little too tough, I reapply the haze remover, and then I start pressure washing again, and it becomes easy again. And so you'll just see me kind of like pressure wash, stop, reapply, and then keep going. And doing this, you can see that it works really well. Like this screen here with the heavy haze, you could kind of see this was the Speedball Diazo photo emulsion, and you just mess up one time, didn't clean it very thoroughly, and this haze kind of sticks in there forever. But it's coming out after, I think I pre-printed that shirt at least a year ago, and so that haze has been sitting on there for a long time. So let's go ahead and speed up this clip so you can watch me reclaim the rest of it. And I would say in general it took me about 5 to 10 minutes to reclaim each screen, and you can see that the haze is pretty well cleaned out. And so here I'm going to hold it up to the light again, and you can see that it's not really blocking the light that it did before, and it pretty much feels like an almost brand new screen. I am honestly blown away by how well this works. Next up, I've got this screen that has a bit of a ghost. It doesn't really have any haze, but we're just going to see if we can take the ghost out just so I can have a brand new looking screen or anything like that. Now, a ghost image is different than having haze in your screen. You can see that they both look like they're stained into the screen, but a ghost image is just when the dye of your inks, usually if you're printing fabric inks, just stains the mesh. The mesh is fabric. The screen printing dyes are doing what they were intended to do, staining fabric or dyeing fabric. And so in this case, the ghost image, the mesh itself is dyed a certain color. It's not really blocked. There's no clogs in between the holes of the mesh, but it's just the mesh itself has a little bit of color. And so that's why when I hold it up to the light, you can't see it anymore. It's gone. It's invisible. It's a ghost. And so it doesn't affect printing or anything like that. But it'd be cool to have a brand new looking screen. And it does kind of clear out some of the ghost for some parts of the image, and it is a little bit lighter than it was before, but really that ghost I would say is still pretty much there. I mean, oh well, we can't get a brand new screen every single time, but I would say it definitely looks a little bit lighter than before. And so this next screen was a department screen, and it was shared by many students probably over the course of at least 5+ years, and we've even switched emulsions in that time. And so I think we used to use like a Ulano TZ emulsion, and then now we've switched to Ulano Orange, a fast curing pre-mixed emulsion, and it looks like it has a little bit of ink in this little red area here. And so it's got a little bit of everything there, and we even have this, what looks to be kind of like tape residue, but it's not sticky. And so I think it was tape residue at one point, and then it just kind of mixed with the emulsion and formed a haze like that. And so this screen's pretty bad. It would definitely leave a very noticeable resist whenever you try and go and print it. And I will say this one was a bit more stubborn than the other ones, probably because this is 5+ years of haze on here. It's a lot older, a lot crustier, but it did manage to power through in about 6 minutes of pressure washing. And when we take a quick look at it, we can see that all of that residue is gone. At least the screen still has some staining, but you can see that a lot of that old image is gone. It doesn't really block the light anymore when I hold it up to the light, and even that tape residue emulsion mixture is gone. And so I would say that this screen gets to have a little bit of life put back into it. Next up is the screen with a heavy residue, the heavy caked on ink around the edges, and this kind of fresh active adhesive in the middle of it. And if you've ever used cheap packing tape to tape up your screens, you know that that adhesive sticks and it does not come off without some harsh chemicals. Now usually I'll use something like mineral spirits if I really want to clear out the tape adhesive. That's not the end of the world really, but let's just see if the haze remover can handle it too. And so I ended up cleaning the screen out in about like 12-ish minutes, and then I spent kind of a lot of time more just kind of chasing the adhesive out of the screen, because you kind of see that it kind of strings back up and then wants to stick down somewhere else. Anyway, I'd say it cleared the screen pretty well. I would say this is definitely the toughest of the screens to clean out. I don't know, that residue was just really stuck in there, but look at that, no more haze and no more tape residue. Last up, we've got this screen with some leftover screen filler residue in it. And you know, screen filler is so hard to reclaim on its own. And so we'll see how hard screen filler haze is to remove. And so I'm going to spray on some haze remover and let's just see where it goes. And honestly, that was the easiest of the screens to reclaim. I wonder how well haze remover works for just clearing out screen filler from the get-go. I honestly might switch over, because that was so much easier than, you know, using the screen filler remover, Bonami simple green kind of mixture. That just always takes forever. And so the screen that was once ruined with haze is now free to pretty much start a second life. And now, before I coat this screen and start printing again, there's one very important step that I need to do, and that is degrease these screens. And so I like to use Bonami kind of cleansing powder, because I can use it in my kitchen and I use it on my screens and cleaning around the studio. It pulls triple duty. And I found a little bit of this powder, scrubbing on the screen will degrease it pretty thoroughly. But they do make industrial screen printing specific degreasers, which you could also use, but I just always have Bonami around my house, and so I use that. Comet bleach powder also works as a nice screen degreaser. If you've got that, you can use that too. And so I'm just going to wet my screen, dust on some powder, and then just scrub it thoroughly on both sides to kind of remove any of the grease or any of the residue left by the haze remover. I actually went through this with my other screen that I did before. I did not degrease it before, and I went to go expose it, and it exposed correctly, but all of that emulsion kind of peeled away from the screen, like it didn't have any sort of hold onto the mesh. And so I think this degreasing step is 1000% important and a must do after you've dehazed your screens. So yeah, once I've scrubbed thoroughly, I'm going to go ahead and pressure wash my screen, and that's just going to clear off any of that powder, residue, gross stuff, and I'm going to have a brand new ready to use screen. And so I went ahead and did this for all of my screens, and then I let them dry. And let's take a look at how they are now. And so I know I'm still in the dark room, it's a little hard to see, but pretty much this first screen is a lot better. There's none of that old emulsion residue. I can see pretty clearly through the whole screen. There's still a little bit of ghosting, of course, but pretty much compared to how it was before, nothing blocking the bright light. All the haze is gone. For the second screen, I would say that it definitely still has that ghost. Whatever they put in that green galaxy ink, that stuff really stains the fabric. Beautiful stuff. But some of that other stains, like the little logo that I had down here, that was kind of in like the pinkish whitish color, that stuff is gone. No more ghost. But yeah, that black ink stains. But overall, still very good. The third screen is looking pretty good. The one that had some emulsion ink kind of mixture and somewhat tape residue still onto it, that was just really old ink and really old emulsion that was on there, and you can see that, you know, it's pretty much gone. And so I think this screen is ready to have its second life. You know, it's definitely a lot better than spending $70 to buy a brand new screen. You know, I would say, you know, it's not perfect and brand new, but you know, it's definitely a lot more life I was going to get out of this screen. Here we have the fourth screen with the heavy and fresh tape residue, and you can see that most of that residue is gone. You still see that, you know, this screen has definitely been through the ringer. It's not looking brand new, but you can see that most of the residue is gone. I did miss a spot. You can see like right here, I could probably take a second pass, clear out that little bit of haze, but overall I would say this is pretty usable for a screen. And so here we have the last screen, and you can kind of see that there's a little bit of ghost from where we printed it, but all of that screen filler is gone. and when I hold it up to the light, not a drop of haze in here. It's still a little bit of staining in that corner over there with the black ink, but haze it is not. You can still see a few spots of water droplets, but that's not haze. That'll dry up. And so in the end, I ended up using about half of this bottle to clear about 10 screens. And so, you know, it's definitely not the 80s screens that they advertise. Maybe my screens are just incredibly hazier than their screens that they're testing on. But I would definitely say that spending $25 on this bottle is better than buying 10 or 20 new screens when your screens get ruined. And so, what is my conclusion? Well, like I said in the beginning, it absolutely does work for my use case, and I would 100% recommend it. You just saw it clear some 2-part emulsion. It cleared out some pre-sensitized emulsion. It cleared out old ink. It cleared out old tape residue. The only thing I didn't get a chance to test it on is plastisols, any like badly plastisol stained screens, because I don't work with plastisols, and so I don't have an old plastisol screen to test it on. But for acrylic inks and water-based fabric inks, it definitely cleared out those types of inks. And I would definitely say the fumes this thing produces are a lot less harmful than the easy off method that I used to do in the past. I would say it still has a little bit of a fume, and you know, I definitely don't think it's ideal to breathe in. I definitely, you know, when I was using it and I got a big whiff of it, it kind of feels like, you know, if you've ever gotten a big whiff of isopropyl alcohol, like the bitterness in the back of your throat, you could definitely taste it. Not fun. And it definitely made my lungs feel a little tingly, I would say, for probably about like 30 minutes after I started doing this. But after I moved to fresh air and, you know, I was out and about in my day, I felt 100% completely normal like an hour or two afterwards. So after looking at the safety data sheet for this thing, I'd probably say that, you know, it's probably no worse than smoking a cigarette or anything like that. You know, not ideal, but, you know, once a year, probably not going to do anything crazy damage to you. Definitely it says not to use this if you are pregnant, and so, you know, I mean, if you're pregnant, you probably should stay away from a lot of the chemicals. But keeping all of that in mind, for me and my studio, this is definitely going to save me a lot of time and money in the future than trying to have to buy new screens when they get kind of filled with haze. And if you work in like a school environment and you've got a lot of trash screens from students not taking care of them, I would probably say that it's also probably worth it. And so that's all I got for this video. Hopefully your screens never haze, and I'll see you in the next video.